Hello? I'll try to speak up. I'm not sure how well this is going to pick up my voice. My name is Eric. I'm going to talk about life as a mobile engineer on a completely distributed team. This is a weird talk for me to give. I was telling Billy, this is a CocoaHeads group where you would think we'd be talking about iOS development or Mac development, and this really isn't that. But he said, don't worry about it. It's an interesting topic, and even if people aren't listening to you, they at least came for the food. So that's his job of soothing my worries. So just to jump right into it, I've been a developer for forever, and I've been doing mobile development since about 2009 for different companies. And about 6.5 years ago, I discovered a company called Automattic when I was job hunting. Automattic is an interesting company. They're global, all over the world. The products they work on, if you haven't heard of the company, you've probably at least heard of some of the products, WordPress.com, Simplenote, WooCommerce, and Jetpack, and others. And they're interesting because their company's 100% distributed. There's no office. Everybody works from home or coffee shops or pretty much wherever there's Wi-Fi. Right now we have, just on my team, we have 2 people who are actually nomadic. They've sold their house, they've packed all their remaining belongings into a vehicle, and they are doing a tour, just driving around the country and stopping to put in, 8 hours of work a day, wherever they can find it. When I started, there was about 100 of us, and now we're over 800. I want to say we're about 850 people in North America, Europe, India, pretty much everywhere except Antarctica. And as soon as we can teach penguins how to code, we'll sort that out. So we have a mobile team that is we're just under 40 people. And we're split up working on iOS and Android primarily. Historically, we did BlackBerry and Windows Phone and WebOS when we were a much smaller team of only 7, and 4 actually. It's interesting how we're able to make it all work, being spread out as we are. And it's not just, geographic location, but time zones, right? People work at whenever their day starts. So what do we do? Or how do we do it? And there's a few, move ahead. How do we do it? There's a couple of things that we really focus on in order to be able to work like this. And the biggest thing we do is transparency in our work. We're Automattic being a part of the WordPress ecosystem. That's basically our business. WordPress being open source, everything that we do, as much of it as we can do, we try to make open source as well. So if you were to go out and look on GitHub, you would find all the source code for all the apps that we work on, all of our libraries. The only thing really that we have hidden are code-wise are private keys. And it's true for the company, our internal communications as well. We communicate through, our internal communication is all done on Slack, in public chat rooms, on GitHub, in issues and pull requests. We have conversations there, on blogs. We don't use project management tools like you would expect. We don't have things like, not to name them, we use blogs, really. That's how we communicate with each other day to day. And we have a couple of special themes and templates that we use just to facilitate things like to-do lists or pinging somebody to get their attention, and comments, things like that. Everything in the company, though, is public. So if I'm curious about what's going on in the world of finance, for whatever reason, I want to know how the company's doing this quarter, I can go and look at that. spread out the way that we are across different time zones, our communication tends to be asynchronous. And this is the other kind of thing that really makes the culture at the company a little unique. You don't have to be in front of your computer when everybody else is. You know, if you work at, how many other people have tried like remote work or done like a distributed work environment? Like a few people, yeah? So a lot of the times you hear that the way companies will try to make it work is everybody still has to be online at the same time. So if you happen to be working, if you're on the West Coast and you're working for a company on the East Coast, you're getting up really early in the morning. And vice versa, you're working really late into the night, right? I have had folks on my team who were in Greece. I've got one on another team that I work with who is in Hong Kong right now. I never see them. But I know that that 24-hour cycle is going to come around, and if I need their attention on something, it's going to be waiting for me, you know, when I start my day. And anything that I need is going to be waiting for them when they start theirs. We tend to not be in a rush. And to do that, you know, you have a lot of trust that comes into being able to do that. Ways we kind of demonstrate that is a company has a fairly flat hierarchy. When I started, well, when the company started, there was like one level of hierarchy. You had everybody, and then you had the founder. And then it got too big for him to talk to everybody, so they introduced this concept of teams. And so you had everybody on the team, then you had a team lead, and then you had the founder. And as we kept growing, we've slowly added in new layers. Today, we just added a company president. We've never had one of those before. That happened in February. So our reporting structure at this point is our founder, our president, our division lead, team leads, and then everybody, which isn't really a whole lot of structure. And we have minimal process. You can't, when we're spread out the way that we are, you really have to trust people to do their job they're hired to do, or you know, have the expectation that anything they've said that they will do is going to get done. And for the most part, that works out really well for us. On our team, the only official we have like two things that we consider process, like mandated process on our team. One, you will do a daily stand-up. So you're communicating with your team what you intend to do. And the other is you will have code reviews before you commit anything. But anybody can commit. And it's not just true on the mobile team, it's true across the company. So I work on the mobile team. Other folks, I'm not a JavaScript engineer. I'm not a PHP developer. I'm not on the teams that really interact with our API, but if I have a need for functionality that doesn't exist, or if I find a bug that needs fixing, I can go do that. And I don't need to ask permission for it. And that's true for anybody in the company. The understanding with that is if there's something that you're going to do, you will make sure you are well informed before you hit that commit button and deploy to all of our users. And do have a code review. So there are still challenges that we have working this way. And they're not really, maybe they're not the challenges people would tend to think that they would be. One of the challenges is in our communication. We try to communicate. We try to over-communicate. That way, anytime somebody would need to know information, there's going to be a resource available to them to go find it, whether it's on a blog post somewhere, whether it's in a chat history somewhere. We have tools that you can search and find these things. But not everybody is an English speaker. Not everybody is English. Everybody speaks English, but not as their first language. And there are very different cultural idioms that we encounter across the company. So some challenges we have worked through is tone. Some cultures tend to be very direct with the way they speak, with the way they approach problems. Others tend to be more passive, I suppose, in the way that you approach a conversation. And trying to find that balance has been something that we've worked through and continue to work through as we hire new people. Time off is kind of an interesting challenge that we sometimes have. If we're focused on getting a project shipped, or a new product, a patch, new feature, we have to consider not everybody does time off, like the typical U.S. company, and we don't. We've mandated you will take 25 days at a minimum. If you don't, we are going to talk to you and find out why you're not taking the time off that you need. Other cultures, other countries have a greater allotment by, legally you're required to take more time off than this, or a company is required to give you more time off than this. After 5 years working for Automattic, you can take a sabbatical and just leave for 3 months. So these are all things that we have to think about whenever we're trying to schedule, when is this new feature going to ship? Are we going to have the people that we need on hand to be able to get it done in time? Waiting, I kind of mentioned this a little bit, but waiting can be kind of a challenge we have, because we do have this really long cycle where half of your team might be in an opposite time zone as you. So you think about things like doing a code review, which has been a topic that's come up a few times. Maybe I ship my code in the morning, and it's there, and I ping somebody for a review. They happen to be the most informed person on that particular topic or feature or whatever. They're really the ones that need to take the time to review this code and make sure it's going to be good. Well, 16 hours later, they might have a chance to look at it and think about it and give me their feedback. 8 hours later, I'm going to see it. And then that whole cycle can go like 2 or 3 times as changes, there are change requests that are made and new reviews that happen. So you figure at least a few days before you land any code, if you're following what we consider to be a good habit. And isolation is also a challenge that we kind of deal with. So if you're working completely remote, the gentleman in Hong Kong that I mentioned, he is the only person, I think, certainly the only person on the mobile team. I think he's our only person in Hong Kong, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm the only person in Oklahoma. As hard as I've tried to get other people hired, I'm still the only one. So for some, it's fine. They enjoy, being alone. They stay at their house or a coffee shop or whatever, and they work. Other people kind of deal with that by coming out to co-working spaces. And we have an allotment. We encourage people to take advantage of it. You can get there's a stipend that you can have just for, having a co-working space. Or if you don't particularly enjoy co-working spaces, you can use that stipend at coffee shops. Get your coffee. Every day of the month, because you're basically renting a space that way. So that is like a really high-level kind of glance at the kind of the way the company I'm at right now works, and the environment that the mobile team tries to operate. The mobile team we've grown so much. We're our own division in the company, and we're split up across 6 teams right now, soon to be 7. And that's not just developers. Teams are made up of developers, designers on multiple platforms. Across the company, we have, biz dev folks. We have happiness engineers, which is what we call our support staff. All the things. So for a more practical example of how we kind of work, and since this is an iOS group, I'll give an iOS example or two. We do a lot with CocoaPods, right? When we decided to adopt CocoaPods as a way of sharing frameworks, that was a situation where we had a few people who had some in-depth knowledge more in that area than anybody else on the team. So naturally, they kind of step up to kind of assume that role. It's the kind of place where we look for the people who are experts in the area, not necessarily who is the person in charge, to kind of lead an initiative. So when we decided to, implement CocoaPods for our libraries. And we had these folks were the ones who kind of stepped up, and they kind of led that and coordinated everybody in the team. Conversations, of course, happened, trying to get the lay of the land just tended to happen in Slack for the people who happened to be around. And then things kind of moved out for more in-depth conversations on GitHub, where that review cycle and those conversations could take a little bit longer. People could be a little more thoughtful, as one example. Different example would be when we adopted Swift. The app was an old app. The iOS app got started in 2010, I think. I want to say 2010. It might have been a little earlier. Over time, it was all legacy, not legacy, but it was all Objective-C, and maybe a little bit of C and maybe a few Ruby scripts. We decided to switch to Swift in 2014, which we began adding slowly, a few classes at a time. And then when we had the switch from, Swift 1.1 to Swift 1.2, there was a very big breaking change in the language at that point. A lot of things just did not work the same way. And at that point, this was, I believe, in 2015, we had maybe a third of our code base had been converted to Swift. So a third of our app was broken. And the way we dealt with this was to pick 4 people. It was me and 3 others. And we made an afternoon of it, basically. We said, okay, we just kind of off the cuff in the morning decided, all right, we got to fix this. We need to make sure, we need to get everything migrated over. Let's just get it done. So between the 4 of us, other people on the team, they just continued on their normal tasks, whatever it happened to be. The 4 of us said, we're going to break off the time and we're going to do it. I sat at a table on the patio at Panera and just went through a couple of dozen files, the ones that I had authored, and made all the changes. And it took us about maybe 6 hours in total altogether, working on and off just as we could to get it done. And these are kind of the ways that we typically just tackle things as they come up. Everything's tends to be very organic, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. We're not waiting for someone to hand us work. We see a need and we tend to just go for it. And that tends to be true for most of the company. Yeah. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about and kind of what I wanted to share. I'm not sure, I'm curious if y'all have been in environments like that before or have had any kind of similar experiences, or if you have any questions about how we're able to do the things that we do. We have, let's see, I'm trying to think of numbers to share. For 800 people, we have 40 people. We have less than 40 people on the team, on the mobile team. More or less equally divided between iOS and Android on 20 people per platform, say 15 people per platform. We do a release cycle that's every 2 weeks. So we have 2 weeks of development time, 2 weeks of QA, and then the app goes into the App Store, and those are staggered weeks. So while one's in QA, there's another release being worked on. We don't plan features to target a particular release. When work is done, that's when it ships, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. So Kern asked, how do we approach blogging internally? So like if we're working on something, if we're making a change, do we do it and then we just talk about it in a blog post? Or do we use it some other way? Yeah. We use blogs for everything, and that's one example. Typically if we have, imagine like an architectural change. We have fairly recently, one of our folks has been thinking really hard about the way we handle pagination. Currently, or historically, the way we've been doing pagination in the apps is to query our API for a certain number of records, pull down all those records, and then when the user scrolls down, we fetch the next batch. And that kind of works. It can be a little expensive because we have to fetch everything fresh every time because we don't necessarily know when new content might have been inserted in between, some of those records that have already been fetched. Kind of heavy of a request. It can be a heavy request. And we'd like to make it lighter, and we'd like to make it, where it's easier to find these insertions or deletions. So it's a tricky problem he's been talking about. He's thought about it for a long time, and before just implementing it, he took a time to actually write a post about it, explaining these are all the problems that I'm seeing with the way we're doing pagination today. These are my ideas for how I think we can sort it out and make it a better experience. And here's like some code examples of the technique that we're talking about. And this kind of kicked off the discussion about it. Large changes like that typically happen, are typically talked about in depth on like a blog first, over a few days maybe, just so that everybody can make sure that everybody has a chance to weigh in on it. And then, depending on the size of the project or the kind of scope that it would have, it would be something that we would kind of figure out, does one person need to work on this, or maybe a few people need to work on this? And we try to find out who's available. If we have other projects that are working, we do the typical kind of let's figure how it fits into our what we're trying to get done this quarter kind of a thing. We do some high-level project planning, but we don't set hard deadlines. Historically, we haven't. We still don't today. We do try to estimate as well as we can. We're often surprised by things that come up that we didn't know about. So no hard deadlines. And for things like this, we can shuffle around other efforts. So that's one example of how we would use a blog. Random conversation. We have water cooler chats. We have water cooler blogs. People post their cat photos. We do like stand-ups, sprint planning in blog posts and in chat. Daily stand-ups typically happen in chat. Weekly, like if you're doing a weekly plan for what you want to accomplish, like in a 2-week sprint. We would do that on a blog post, and then at the end of that, we would do like a little mini retrospective, so you could go back and kind of say, this is how things went. This is what we were able to accomplish. Retrospectives are a thing. We try to do that because we're always trying to communicate back to how something went and what lessons were learned. But it's a lot of chatter, and that's kind of one of the other challenges we have to deal with is how do you cope with the noise? How do you get your signal to noise ratio where it needs to be? Yeah. Answer your question? Okay. Cool. Anybody else? Yeah. How or who determines what work is to be done? Historically, not so much today, but when we were a smaller company, you did. An individual would. On a high level, our founder might have some ideas about what he'd like to see accomplished for the year, or what sort of where we wanted to move the business or move a product to make it better positioned. And he'd have some thoughts to share, but generally speaking, if there was something that you saw needed improving, or an area that needed something that needed solving, you just figured it out. You would tackle that. You would talk to your team lead to kind of coordinate, make sure you gut check that you're not going off in the wrong direction, right? Today we're a little more structured. We have kind of like broad themes that we try to tackle for the year, and we try to make sure that the work that we do fits into those themes. But the teams themselves typically decide what work they're going to do. So for the team I'm on, one of the teams in the mobile division, we had a meetup. We all got together earlier in the year, and we sat down and we said, okay, look, this is kind of what our theme is for our work this year. What sort of tasks or what sort of projects would we want to work on that are consistent with this theme? And the team came up with, I think, 43 potential projects, and then we kind of just prioritized there to decide this is what we're going to do. And then it just became a matter of scoping it, like how many people do we need to work on this? So 1 person, 2 people, yeah. And then just knock them out. Yeah. Did you? Sorry, Brian, did you say that?
So what do you guys do for, like when you're hiring? So if you have a different culture,
Yeah. How do we approach hiring given this is the way our culture is? Hiring is interesting. We do a couple of things. Traditionally, our hiring is, we try to only target more experienced folks for our hiring. When we've shied away from hiring junior developers, and there are different opinions on whether or not that's a good thing for the company, which we're still having conversations about. But when someone applies, and we've decided that we want to work with them, they may have a code test just to kind of make sure that, yes, this is somebody who actually does know how to do the job that they're applying to do. We'll do a trial with them. It's a paid trial, and they'll work with us the way they would if they were a full-time employee for maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month, maybe 2 months, depending on how long that trial goes. There's usually 1 project, sometimes 2. And we try to manage these where it's work that could be done while you are living the rest of your life. So yes, you probably have a job already, and you probably have a family. You might have young children. The work that we want you to do needs to demonstrate your capabilities, but it doesn't need to ruin your life while you're trying to get a job here. So it's generally something we try to target 20 to 40 hours of work over 2 weeks to a month's worth of time. And then if everybody likes everybody, if you like working with us, if we like working with you, then we'll extend an offer. And that's generally how it goes. Sometimes it can take a while. And then once we're done, it used to be the case that Matt Mullenweg, our founder, would want to have a final chat with everybody who is being hired at the company. He's so busy now, he's not able to do that. So that's something that's been delegated to other folks. But your final step in the hiring process used to be the Matt chat, which, if you were lucky, it lasted maybe an afternoon. If you were unlucky, it could last a couple of weeks. I think the worst case I ever heard was it was an on and off conversation that drew out over the course of 3 months, just because people's scheduling was just super, super weird. But we don't do that anymore. Yeah. 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 I think a lot of that comes out organically. I mean, we do have it written out. Like, these are like what our expectations are. This is what you can kind of expect. We like to say welcome to the chaos, just because of how much is going on, and just the nature of our work tends to be very difficult, or not difficult, but very different from what people have previously experienced. But we do try to, we want to work with everybody. We want the team, makes an effort to be welcoming, to answer any question that comes up, to make sure that that the project they're working on is setting the right expectations for what they would be doing. And we've gotten better at that, over time. Yeah.
So during the sprint,
Yeah.
do you expect an employee to work a certain number of hours, or as long as they accomplish everything that was mentioned to them in the sprint, they're happy?
So during a sprint, is there a certain amount of hours we expect people to work, or is it more about what's delivered? It's more about what's delivered. And there's a balance there. Life happens. People have things going on. Sprints are we're not strict about them. Sprints are used to just time box, kind of what we think we can do. It's not like a hard and fast rule. We don't have deadlines. We do estimate what we think we can accomplish. But if you say, I'm going to do these 5 things, and you get 2 of them done because your spouse was in a car wreck and your child's school burned down and I don't know, whatever happened. You were caught in a forest fire in Vancouver. Yeah, it's fine. No harm, no foul. We're not gonna worry about that. Like, when it would start to be a concern would be when it started to have a pattern. Like if you see somebody who's consistent, everybody can see everybody else's work, right? The team is going to know if there's somebody on the team who's not pulling their weight, so to speak. And once the trend has been identified, that's when it starts to become a concern. That's when people start to get talked to. And I guess since we're on the topic, I can talk about how that's dealt with just a little bit. We really try to work with someone. And like, no kidding, we seriously try to work with somebody who's having a problem with their performance. It's not just like you didn't do these 5 things, you're fired. The mobile team in particular makes a very strong effort to make sure that A, we understand what your situation is and have empathy about that, and 2, what things do we need to see happen where everybody can be happy with your performance. And that's quite explicitly spelled out. This is what we need to see. And that period of time it takes as long as it needs to. You can put it that way. Yeah. Other questions? Do the time estimates live in Slack? For the dailies, for like what you're doing for your daily stand-up, yeah. For other projects, no. For like long-term things, no. Teams decide how they want to manage themselves. So that's why I didn't talk too much about project management tools. Some folks really like using Trello. And they'll have their Trello board set up, and they'll have their swim lane set up, and then they'll like put a deadline, not a deadline, but like a goal, like a date for a goal, and everything above that particular card is what you're trying to get done for that goal. So you can like look into their Trello board and you can see stuff. Other folks like to use just blog posts, and they'll have like a big long to-do list. It's like, this is the stuff that we're trying to do, and just written in the blog post. This is our target date. This is what we think we can do. It's up to individual teams to decide how they want to work. Yeah. So there's a lot of variety, a lot of learning when you switch teams. Yeah. Yes, sir. So do we have a product manager who decides, or who handles the task of deciding what features need to be worked on, or do we do it organically? Both. We have a bit of both. We don't have very many people across the whole company that would be considered a product manager. We do have them. For the mobile apps, we don't currently. It's something we've talked about. Is it something that we need? For the apps, we tend to just look at what gaps in functionality are there between what we can do in the app itself versus what you can do on the web. And then we as a team try to prioritize what's the stuff that's going to make the most sense. What are users going to get the most benefit from, really? It's kind of how we drive those decisions. Team leads tend to fill that role quite a bit, but it's not limited to them. The mantra is anybody in the company can speak up about anything anybody else is working on, and should, if it's something they're passionate about. So for example, we have, you'll see people like role shift. Like we've had several folks who started out as, like in the support staff, as happiness engineers, and decided that they really had a passion for coding. So we've had people move into like a JavaScript engineer role. We've had someone move out of happiness, move into marketing, and is like doing wonderful work in marketing now. I think we've had someone do the same with biz dev. Still waiting on someone to come to the mobile team, But we've had folks in the mobile team who have done great work on iOS and Android and then left to go work on other teams, doing more of like a skunkworks kind of thing. Just experimenting with a lot of different technology and see where it can take them. Yeah. We have a mobile division, which is about a little under 40 people, and then we're divided into currently 6 teams. One is a platforms team, if you will, responsible for release management. This is new. It's a new thing we've done. We decided that release management was such a pain, we wanted a team dedicated to it. We have another team that's all of our designers. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 engineering teams currently. We need a 5th one because we're too big. We try to keep teams, I think the sweet spot for a team size is around 6 people. I think my team is 10 right now. It's a bit too big.
So your team's segregated by product, like a specific mobile app, or by specialization?
Our team's separate. How are teams separated? We have one team dedicated to a product. We have a WooCommerce. We have a team dedicated to Woo, and then the other engineering teams are dedicated to the WordPress apps. So I guess that's kind of how our product is split that way. As far as the teams dedicated to the apps, 2 teams are kind of one's focused on platform improvements or taking advantage of platform features. So like improving media support on iOS or Android, dealing more with media libraries would be one example. One team is focused on making improvements to our editor. And then another team is focused on just making sure users have a really good experience in the app. It's really vague. The project name is No Dead Ends. And the idea is like you should be able to go through the app and always be able to find your way around and never get stuck on a block. And so that's what that team's focused on, making sure there are no blocks. Dead ends, yeah. Cool. Yeah. Right. So we're super distributed. How do we deal with getting together? How do people actually get to interact with each other? A few ways. We do Hangouts. And the easiest way is we try to make an effort weekly to have a video hangout where everybody attends. And sometimes these are project focused, or sometimes they're work focused. Sometimes there we go. Sometimes they are, just for fun. Yeah, try not to. How about, let's just do that. So that's like the very basic thing that we do, is just make an effort to have that personal interaction with your team. Everyone should expect to travel a little bit. Here's the thing that's neat about Automattic, and we don't have offices. All the money that we would spend on offices, we can spend on travel. So we pay people to get together a couple of times a year. Teams will just have a meetup. And you try to pick a place that's not too inconvenient, travel-wise for everybody to go to, but it's also up to the team to a certain degree of where they want to go to meet. I think the first meetup the company ever had was a bunch of folks from the States decided to go to Greece. And that was fine. And then every year we have what we call a grand meetup, and the whole company gets together somewhere in the world, usually in North America. And this year we're so big, we've actually had to split. So one division went and had theirs in Montreal, and the rest of the company is meeting in about a month, a little over a month, in Orlando. And there'll be 600 and some odd of us just enjoying each other's company. Yeah. Questions? No? Cool. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. Thanks for the questions.